All right, recording here. We are with the Rufus and Mike part 2 continued. Looking at today, trying to zone in on pride and ego and how they interact and potentially conflict with one another. So I guess we'll just start off. And Mike, what do you think the difference is between pride and ego?
I don't think that I have the answer necessarily to the difference between pride versus ego. I think it's more complicated than that. I don't think it's my answer is going to be the one answer. I think that there's probably more answers to it, according to each person. But my thoughts on it, what lately I've just kind of been really looking at it and trying to figure it out, and I've been seeing how my own ego has been detrimental to every part of my life. But I've also heard people say, you can't be good at something without having ego. But I'm starting to see that there's a separation somehow between ego and pride. How like pride is something like you can take, again, I'm not saying I'm the authority on this, but I feel like I can take pride in things that I've earned. Like if I've invested my time, into learning a trade or learning an art or a fighting style or anything, learning how to fish. Rufus, that's something you do. That's not something that I could do, commercial fishing. Right. I don't know how to do that. Right. But anything that's invested my time into, I can be proud of. And that goes along with family members. I can be proud of my wife when she does really good at school because I have time invested in her. It's not, I didn't teach her how to be a physical therapist, but I've got 16 years invested in her. So when she does something good, I'm very proud of her. Or like a parent with a child, you've got a lot invested in that little human being. And so when they do something good, you have every right to be proud of them. But I feel like ego is more of like maybe an entitlement. Like ego is like, we feel like we're entitled to respect, or we're entitled to, people treating us a certain way but there's really no because. Like ego just you, what I'm saying? Like you didn't earn that thing that you're expecting people to give you.
Right.
I don't know. That's just one little, detail of this bigger subject that I'm, because I'm trying, again, I'm just looking for that balance. I'm trying to find the equilibrium between the killer and the kitten. You know what I'm saying? And if I feel like that being able to crush my ego, I've found great success. In every aspect of my life by pushing my ego down. But I've also found great, success in my life because of the pride that I take in the work that I do. I take pride in my work. My work is not something that I've got a lot of time invested in. My work is just what I do every single day, but I take pride in every single thing that I do. If I'm gonna go paint the barn, I'm gonna paint the barn the best I can. I'm gonna take pride in that thing. If I go brush my teeth, I'm gonna brush my teeth the best that I can. I'm gonna take pride in my teeth. So I think that pride is good, and I think that ego is bad. And I'm starting now to see like a split. But it's so close. It's such a fine line that you've got to walk. That you've kind of got to. You can't. If you get too prideful, you slip down that slope into ego. You know what I'm saying? But if you can quell back your ego a little bit and have a little pride in yourself, I think that. I don't know. I think that. I think you can have pride in yourself, but I don't think you can have ego in yourself. You know what I'm saying? Ego is it's just different. I'm kind of, that's where I'm kind of running into like a dead end at, it's like, okay, here's where I'm at with it, but where do I go with it?
Yeah. I think those kind of plateaus of like not knowing for me are really I'm in one right now, right? And that's what Chris knows that you don't know, Mike, is that I actually am not any longer on that fishing boat. So that's the like I'm in a transitional period relative. It's personal reasons. It has nothing to do with anything. But I'm exactly in that spot where I'm recognizing how I had built maybe a little bit of my ego and pride for the past couple of years, both and around that activity. And now I don't know what's next either. And that's the same spot of like, I don't know. You helped me think through some of it, I think, between the writing that you like the writing on your profile where you're talking about ego has no place in learning is one place that you mentioned ego. And it was like, I identify with that because you have to be able to make that mistake. But then having enough pride maybe to be like, I'm still a human, like whatever I am accomplishing in the world, like I tried to do that thing and I'm trying again and I'm trying again. And that like, I don't know. I feel like I'm shrinking. I'm not old by any stretch of the world, but I'm getting older to the point where I feel like I'm seeing how pride in littler things is serving me much bigger than needing to like be a hero champion in some big way, like needing that big ego boost. It's nice. Like I love attention, just like anybody. But I don't know. This feels a little bit related, unrelated too. Maybe I should throw it back to Chris.
No,
Like rein us in.
I think you're right on with what you're saying. I think that like I was just having a good thought as you were saying that, you know, that you can't, shit, it's kind of slipping away now.
Oh, it's cool. Let me do that. I'll do a little intersection and then you can half listen to me and half trying to find it. So, but the interesting thing that kind of both of you looked at, I personally have a weird issue in saying that I have pride in another person. And I say that because you talked about the investment, Mike, and for me, that gets skewed too often as an ownership. Like, you did good because I helped you. And personally, I want zero. So in my mind, you can only be proud of yourself, right? That is only an internal thing. In my take of it. And that if people I know do great things, I'm happy for them, but I don't feel it necessarily the same as pride. And this comes from someone who very purposefully tries to minimize, I don't want to say necessarily pride, but ego, because I'm finding as much as I want to be good and give to the world, me looking through my own sets of eyes blocks things off. Like it's always going to be a skewed kind of vision that I'm after. So my ego gets in the way of me seeing the bigger reality a whole lot. And I don't know if that was enough time for you to get your thought back, but, or trigger a new one.
I see exactly what you're saying in one way, and also like you're saying, you don't take pride in what other people do because you don't want to take credit for it. But I've never thought of it that way before. Like I've never thought of me being proud of someone as like me taking credit for them, especially in a situation where like I know I didn't help them. Like the example I used with Maggie going to school, like every once in a while, like I'll take her flashcards and quiz her, you know, while we're on a hike or something, just to try to help her study out in nature because it's a better learning environment. But I don't have any hand in her retaining that information. There's absolutely no way I could even fathom taking any credit for anything that she does. But I can still feel an overwhelming sense of pride. Like when she walks, you know, for graduation, she gets that cap and gown, and like I'm just gonna be overwhelmed. I'm probably gonna cry. I'm gonna be so happy for her.
When's that happening?
Do what?
When's that happening?
Well, I'm not sure because the whole coronavirus thing, they've been kind of set off. But
Sure.
she's finishing up her last set of clinicals.
Yeah.
I think next week, and
Okay.
then she'll do like her exit exam and then a licensure exam. So she's already finished all the class part.
Right.
She's just going to finish up the technical parts to
Right,
actually, get her name on that real piece of paper.
Right. Yeah.
From the college, but
yeah, I can relate to some of that too, because I'm thinking now. We mentioned earlier, Liz, my wife, she is a diesel mechanic, right? That wasn't on the recorded part, that's why I'm mentioning it again. But I remember going, like, I've been alongside her since the beginning of her wanting to do that. Like, she was a captain and then wanted to just become a mechanic. That didn't work out as herself. She just couldn't get, I want to be a mechanic, like, right or wrong. That's how it happened. So she went to school, and then going through school the whole way. Like, that's the point where I really plugged in just now, is the, like, yeah, I was really surprised to be sitting in the audience, right, and watching after she's been, talking way, way over my head in terms of engines, like, whoa. And yeah, that feeling of, like, wow, like the accomplishment of having gone through the school and then now had the other job and going to Antarctica, like, totally living this adventure of that. And it's, I don't know, it's a funny thing to feel like, I hear you on the, like, back and forth. I guess I would identify some of it as pride, but like in the perseverance, maybe, like, in the, like, it's helped me see, right? It's something that I'm coming back to now when I'm in between things and being like, oh, she's been living a dream. Like, maybe I can do that too. What even is that? And that's where I, like, cycle back to what I was sharing with you guys the other day about fishing helping me find, like, ego to, like, think that I was a human that was worthy of a dream, and that's, like,
that's the difference. It's
yeah,
not the ego that you need, though. It's pride.
right.
It's absolutely pride. And I think that taking pride in the small details,
Mm-hmm.
is, like you were saying, you don't need to have, like, a superhero moment. This was my thought. You're not looking for, like, to be a superhero. You're looking for ego in small details. Well, ego
Yeah.
can't. The other day I said, what was ego? Is the love of uselessness,
Yeah.
or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
because the things that you lust after with ego don't serve you.
Yeah.
But if you take pride in the small details in life, like if you make your bed every morning and you brush your teeth and you tuck your shirt in, like the military, like a lot of that stuff, cutting the hair and all that stuff it doesn't matter what your hair looks like when you go to fight somebody. It doesn't matter if your shoes are shiny. It doesn't matter if your bed is made at home. But it's the discipline that it instills in you to take pride in these very small details that creates, something more. And I think that we could all use that in our lives. Like, if we were to take pride in every little detail, when we put our underwear on, we do it with pride. And then everything after that, that's something I learned in boxing, is if you throw a lazy jab, the rest of your combo is going to be lazy too. But if you throw a quick, snappy jab, everything behind it is going to be fiery. So you've got to do the smallest details with pride if you want to have those results in the big things that you do.
Yeah.
It's never ego. I think that it's never ego that you need to have. I think that it's pride at the most base level.
Just a super quick interjection between your guys's, you talked about your partnerships. And I think that both of you talked about wives, and I think about, well, I just don't want I don't have, nor do I really want a togetherness, right? Where this person that is like, I'm all dodging as much as possible. So I think that's probably, if I had someone that was kind of intertwined like that, like so deeply that they were part of me and I were part of them, I would probably extend pride out to them. But until that point, it's like, I'm here and you're there and I'm happy, I'll help you, I'm happy, but what you do,
Yeah.
I don't want reflection on me. I want
Yeah.
you to take it.
I think I don't know, this is going to be a little, I'm probably going to like lose myself in trying to talk about this next bit, but in relationship to it, it's like I have a messed up relationship to it because some of the like I didn't sometimes those like expressions of parental pride in like you as a child for doing X or Y or Z, sometimes that's misused and like strung along, you know, and you're the kid that's like trying to do something to make this person proud, right? And not thinking about your own self and like your own pride in it. And that's where I think the small piece is really important. And I think about that with like, you were talking about it in relationship to fighting, Mike, last time, of like not trying to win, but just trying to like land that jab so that your combination is good, so that like, and like focus on those details. And I was talking to Chris a little bit about continuing this, like trying to learn to juggle with these trap runners. And I've been going back to that thought of it, of like, yeah, in my picture, I have some picture of what I'm doing. But if I lose my train of thought, then like I catch it pretty good. And it's like a good reminder of like, oh, I should have focused a little bit more on my grip maybe, and making that good and prideful. I like the image of the putting your underwear on with pride. It's a good idea though, but like bringing it at the same time, I'm not gonna disclose what the state of my bed is right now. It's not kept up so well. That's when your partner who you are intertwined with is away in Antarctica, you might need to find a little more self-pride to do your chores, I would say. But
I mean, if you think about it, you know, you think about making someone else proud. You know, what you were just saying about like thinking about what can I do to make someone proud. I wasn't always a fighter. I wasn't always, you know, someone that you could sit and talk with like this. You know, my younger years, I spent a lot of time in trouble. You know, I spent a lot of time probably causing my mom a lot of stress. And one of the things that kind of kept me going fighting and has kept me going on a good path was trying to make my mom proud of me, because I had spent so many years doing bad stuff and doing things that I knew she was not proud of, that once I found fighting and I saw how proud my mom was when I won the first time, you know, I won a fight, that was it. That became an addiction for me, was to continue to make my mother proud, my mother proud. Even when I didn't like fighting anymore, I wanted to continue to make my mother proud. And I knew that that's something that she was proud of, was that I was, you know, doing that hard work every single day, going to fight camps and, you know, just training my butt off and fighting the good. I mean, just, she was proud of that. And so, I mean, Chris, you talk about how you don't have anyone to be proud of, but I know that you like teach people, and I know you've probably got maybe nieces and nephews or something like that, that people that you've invested your time in that it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that you're romantically involved with or invested in, but other people in your life that you're invested in. Like if I teach, like I used to teach kids jujitsu at a school, and man, when a kid sinks an arm bar in a tournament and taps somebody out, man, that sense of pride is out of this world. That's not my kid, and I didn't do anything.
right.
But man, when that kid got that arm bar in that tournament, that was the great. And then seeing them get on the podium, and then seeing the interaction with their parents, like, man, to me, that's pride. And if I was a jerk, I could push it over into ego and say, look what I did. I made this kid good. And I think that's where you cross the line. I think if you were to try to take credit for that situation, that would be ego. If you can just look at this and have a sense of pride without trying to take credit, then that's a good thing. That's pride. I think that shows humility and like just good, decent, characteristics in a person.
I agree. I agree there are certain lines. I just think I'm very deliberate about very particular things. And so in that moment, I have huge joy that they got it. But I still, if I try to articulate it, I still would stop myself from saying pride just because of the way that I like to frame and box things. So I completely understand what I'm happy for is that they got it and that there was a successful transfer. Like that makes me ecstatic. But I still, for me, the pride is an intertwining thing. And I literally want to step back and like, just let them have their moment. And for me personally, that's why I wouldn't say it's pride, but I would say it's the exact same feeling. I just call it something else.
Yeah, I hear that. And I like, when I think about the kid, like going back to the kid example and also the little like pridefulness and little things along the way, like I think of that image because I have my own self in my head that like couldn't do stuff, and then having the person, whether it's a teacher or whether it's a friend, like, sit there on the other end and be willing to rebound for you if you're trying to learn to shoot your foul shots, or like be willing to like, feel like, I think about playing catch with any kid, if that's like in the repertoire, right? Like the person who's teaching or just like receiving is having to field all the stuff. And it's like, no, come on, like right here, right to the glove, please. Like, I don't know, that patience. And that's, I think, part of where the pride sometimes comes from too, is just the like, I don't know what teaching kids jujitsu is like, but I imagine it's pretty similar to teaching anything of like, no, like this, this, and like realizing that you have to be super patient with like getting there.
Imagine having a big padded room, how hard it would be to keep children under control and paying attention, because that's where jiu-jitsu takes place, is a big padded room.
And they're like, whoa!
Yeah, so reining them in, there's a reason I don't teach kids classes now. There's a special place in heaven for people that teach kids classes, for sure.
But yeah, and I think about you said Maggie is your wife? Yeah, like I think about the physical therapy work. Like you're dealing with people that have injuries that are potentially, debilitating or whatever, like, and trying to come up with like, why do I want to learn to do this thing again? My mom was an occupational therapist, and like I know other physical therapists too. It's the same, like, and that's another area where like breaking it down, but also like the ego, for like when I think about my mom with occupational therapy, teaching people who had a hand injury, like how to write again, and being like, I can't even write my own name. Like that's an ego hit. And her piece on that was always like, that there needs to be like a mental health component to the physical therapy as well. And like, I think that's what a lot of people in these movement worlds, whether it's jiu-jitsu or whatever the thing is, that's part of what's driving it. Is like, I have that killer kitten, right? Or like, maybe it's a killer kitten. But yeah, trying to find those kinds of balance, and movement happens to be a way that a lot of people find their way into it. And it happens like, when I get on the good feedback loop of that movement, where it's like skill acquisition and like I'm getting into a groove, it can feed in a really positive way. But then like, I don't know, and this I think back to the learning fishing or learning any kind of sport, of if the ego is out of control, right? I would start do it, like I would push my body in a way that it shouldn't be going, like push it, like not reading injury, right? And being like, oh, I can take it. But then like, why did I just do damage that now I have 3 months of taking care of a stupid injury? Because I was so in my head that like, I can X or Y or Z, and being like, ooh.
That's a good thing right there. If you think about it, like, think about having a weight or think about like just physical training, right? If you have ego when you're lifting a weight, you're going to get hurt. But if you have pride when lifting a weight, you're going to get better, or you're going to get stronger. You see what I'm saying? if you have enough pride to work out, then that's a good thing. But if you work out with ego, you're going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I feel like it's so important for us to define this difference between ego and pride, is because we can go pride, we can go ego first and jump off a bridge like an idiot and smash our head at the bottom of a, waterless hole. Or we can have a little pride in what we do and, maybe look over the edge first and think about it and make a rational decision instead of, being dummies and jumping off the bridge for no reason. I think it really is that much of a difference. It's really that drastic, because like I said last time we were talking, I went from and living under the same conditions. I live in the same house. I drive the same vehicle. I live with the same person. I have the same dog. I wear the same, my clothes don't fit as good anymore because I've lost a lot of weight. But everything's the same as it was 1 year ago, except for I have crushed my ego. Then I was fat and unhappy and on the verge of suicide. Now I'm very healthy. People compliment me daily on how I look better. My friend Jerry complimented me today. He said, man, you lost a ton of weight. What did you do? All I did. I mean, there was a lot of things that have happened over the last year with training and eating and, all of that. There's a lot of stuff that's happened. But the one most important thing that happened was I had to kill my ego and grow my pride. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you can't, like we were saying before, it's like a water balloon or like a Bosu ball. If you push down in one spot, it all comes up around it, and so you've got to have that balance, and you've got to have strength. This is the thing that I was thinking about. Everything works in chains for me for some reason. I was thinking about this quote that I heard in a movie. It was like a kid's movie. And this one character said to the other one, the first step to not being afraid is acting like you're not afraid. And so to me, I want to find balance. So the first thing I need to do to find balance is try to balance. And so I got my rubber ball, Bosu ball out in the gym. And I'm just going to try to get on this thing and balance. My friend Dave Jansen is a guy that you really should talk to. He used to fight in Bellator as well. He fought for the world title. He can stand on one of those rubber balls, those exercise balls, stand on it and juggle at the same time.
Sure.
Dude is legit. And he can also beat up probably 99% of the world. So the guy he's great. But I was trying to balance on that ball. And something that I noticed was I was sitting there just shaking. And it's because muscles were firing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I realized something, that if one side is weaker than the other, there is no balance. Mm-hmm. Both must be equally strong. And if you think about it, to have a strong killer and have a strong kitten, right? You got to have a strong cuddly side, a strong love muscle, but you've also got to have this strong killer instinct, this strong survival instinct of, if a saber-toothed tiger decides to chase me on my way home today, I've got to be mentally and physically prepared to kill it with my bare hands. But when I get home, I've got to be mentally and physically prepared to hold my baby and not crush it and kill it. Yep. So I think, but if either one of those is weak, like if you've got a weak man that's not capable of defending himself and his family, that's a dangerous person, because he's not upholding his contract in nature, in my opinion. And also, if you've got a man who is not able to be tender and loving enough with his family, then he's not going to be able to reproduce and continue the lineage. So there absolutely must be balance. There has to be a strong killer, and there has to be a strong kitten, because if either one is weak, it's going to overpower the other. If both are weak, then they will neglect their duties and therefore fail. If you can't protect yourself and make it home, you're dead. Your family falls to the wayside, they die. You failed. You failed the whole mission. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like in the quest for balance, and in the quest, and then pride and ego, we've got to balance both of those. There almost has to be ego.
Yeah.
If there's going to be pride, and because I don't know, it's such a weird dynamic here.
Yeah.
That's why I need other people to talk to.
I'm curious too, because like I'm someone who I didn't really come into my body until late in my life, and it's I think about those, like the way that kind of valuing for that like killerness, right, played out in the schoolyard, etc. And it was like I had some success like wrestling. I didn't have a lot, but that I don't know, just like I guess I'm curious, like if we talk about how fighters, like so much of it is mental, right, and so much of it is heart, and so much of it is creativity and adaptation, I don't feel like those skills were like really valued for me when I was younger, right? Like it was like, oh, if you can beat the person up, that's cool. But there wasn't much into the like thinking piece of it, even though when I talk to experienced fighters, that's what it's all about. Or that's part of the practice. It's like, yeah, it's cool that you can be on top and like submit that guy. But more and more when I'm encountering, especially people that have like transition to another period in their fight career, it's about the mental practice and finding that balance. And I guess the question, if there's a question in there, is like, does that resonate with you, Mike? Like when you were younger, was that like, were people saying like, oh, like you're super creative and you're super like you're adapting this and that, and like I want to hear your, just your opinion, to say nothing of what you can do with yourself?
So when I was a kid, before I ever learned any kind of fighting, anything, like I fought growing up, but it wasn't fighting in an organized sense. It was like me fighting my brother and his friends, or me fighting in school. And so I don't know, from a young age, like having always fought my brother, fighting never was really like just fighting. I think fighting in the streets, like fighting in real life, is so much different than fighting in the cage.
Yeah.
And the reason, or fighting in any competition, even like a jiu-jitsu competition. And that's because when you show up to a jiu-jitsu competition or a cage fight or anything of that nature, you're going up against another skilled opponent, and you have to game plan, and you know that this thing has come upon, like you've known about it for weeks, you got ready for it, you like dieted for it, so this thing has been weighing on your mind, you've been nervous about it. And whereas a fight in real life happens spontaneously, and you don't know what the other guy's got, but you've let emotion take over. It's very rare that you fight somebody outside of a competitive arena in a rational, sensible way. If you were being rational and sensible, you wouldn't be fighting them in the first place. You'd be talking it out over beers or coffee or something. And so I think that fighting, real world fighting, it can't be done like we fight in a competition arena, because it's just like if you were an architect and you got your first big drawing, and you would apply all the things that you've spent all your time learning, and you would think about, how am I going to use my ruler? How am I going to use my protractor? How am I going to make this thing into what I need it to be, using the tools that I've been given, or that I've acquired? And so for a fighter or a competitor, whether it's baseball or fighting or anything, and for a competitor, when you go to compete against another competitor, you're using all the tools that you've used to create this thing that you are. I mean, without all those tools, I wouldn't be a fighter. I'd be something else. You know, if I had the tools to be a roofer, I'd be a roofer. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah. So what I'm saying is, it's a totally different thing. I don't think that you can compare. It's not like an apples to apples comparison. A fight in real life it's just different, you know?
You can't, yeah, you can't, but I guess that's the question I think that I'm like curious about is the like, was that like when we've been talking about pride and ego, it's been like this self-developed thing, and I'm just curious about the things that we're like that we express value in to young people, and like this is like a good thing to feel pride in, this is a good thing to feel ego in. And like as I've grown older, right, like when I was younger, I thought, oh yeah, I got to pick this or I got to pick that. And as I get older, I meet people like Chris, I meet people like you that are so like so many parts make up you. Like it's not just Mike the fighter, it's Mike the like livestock cattle guy. And also like maybe this is a good illustration, like cartoon of the I could feel some pride for you when you're telling the story about like my stepdad said his record was seven gates in a day, and I'm sitting there like waiting for like what did Mike get, what did Mike do, I mean like 13 in 3 hours, and being like that expression of like yeah, like that's some pride for Mike. But like I guess the pride that I feel is less for you individually and more just for like that process that says like I saw a drudgerous task, I saw something that looked really boring, and maybe I was motivated by like wanting to beat stepdad or dad or whoever, but the value is like I showed an easier way to do something with less stress, less struggle, less fighting. And that's, I don't know, I don't see that particular value being valued for people like us so much. Like I don't for my worker peers, you know, like the number of worker peers that I've met on fish boats that I come up to and I'm like, can you show me a trick to this? And they're like, I don't know anything. And you're like, what? Like, are you in there? And they're like, I don't know how to do. And you're like, oh no, like you need a little ego maybe, or you need a little pride, like like I can do a thing. And that's, I guess that's my question, Mike. Like, did you have people like valuing you for other things besides what you could do with your body, whether it was work or fighting or?
I did. I actually got into art. I was really big into art when I was in school, when I was younger.
Right on.
I won some awards for some stuff that I did in art, but then I also got into trouble because of art, because I would spend all my time in class doodling and drawing and making art. And because I enjoyed it so much, I just decided to dive straight in. And so I didn't care. When I was a kid, I kind of had this mentality of, I don't care because I'm going to go in the military and I don't need your shit when I get to the military. And so, I mean, that was just, you know, that was my mindset. Every man in my family had been in the military. And so that was just, I didn't really even think about it. It wasn't the goal. It was just, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I would get in trouble in school for doing what I wanted to do, drawing or skipping class or whatever, I mean, I got in trouble for skipping class pretty young. There was a pond out behind the school, and I was like, I'd rather go hang out at the pond than go to class. So I just disappeared after lunch, and yeah, I got in a bunch of trouble. But yeah, as a kid, creativity, I think what was kind of a big thing for me. And then at first it was encouraged, but then, you know, it kind of got out of control. And, you know, then it was like, hey, another thing was I was really, really good at baseball.
Uh-huh.
And then when I stopped doing good at school, at some point in school, I got bored with academics because I had an older brother. And when he started bringing home schoolwork, I started learning too.
Right.
And so I was 2 years ahead of everybody in my class because I already knew everything that they were doing because he did it. And so I knew the answers. I could go write the answers on the board, But then, you know, when it was time to do the homework, I was like, I'm not doing that. I've already done this. I did it 2 years ago. I'm not doing it again. I know the answers. You can't make me, make me do the homework. And so I would get in trouble for that.
I was the same way. In 6th grade, we had to do book reports, right? And we could get extra credit if we turned them in early. And I learned that if I turn some number of points, right? And so I did it with each one until I realized I did my math in my head. I didn't like math, but I could do it. That I didn't have to do any more homework and I would still get an A in the class. And the teacher was like, well, you can't, no, you still have to do every assignment. And I was like, well, you're changing the rules. I learned that. And so I don't know, there's something in that though, I think, like in that, I'm curious about, like you say, it's sad on the one hand for me to hear someone say like creativity, art got me in trouble. Like I went too far with it. Like that feels impossible to me. It's like absolutely duck into that notebook. I'm so curious about because I'm a drawer and a doodler and I got in trouble. I had that happen with a teacher who was like, you can't have your markers in class. And I was like, well, it's how I take notes. I see that person has multiple color pens. And they were like, yeah, but they're writing and you're drawing. And I was like, yeah. And look, like right here in the picture is where you were talking about like this molecule. And right here in the picture is where you're talking about this. That's how my mind works. Like, teacher, don't tell me no. Like and then I don't know, this stuff gets me riled up because then fast forward into this computer world that got you frustrated, like as we're getting in here, and me too, like I'm okay with it, but holy cow, like every 1 year it's a new system that I'm like, I don't know where to push. I want to talk to that person. I want to push the button and do it. And it's like, ew, it's very viscerally frustrating. But then why I went in there is like, I see a thing that says, oh, doodling helps you think. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Like, so it's, yeah. I don't know. But you got in trouble for art? You got in trouble for art?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
You know, it was kind of needed though. I mean, because if you think about it, like, it's like anything else. If you drink too much milk, you're going to wind up with gallstones. Milk, you see what I'm saying? But I think that
I do. I probably have too much art going on right now.
There's a lesson to be learned in that, and you know, and it's okay. It's okay to practice self-care, but if all you practice is self-care, then you're self-centered and you're selfish and you don't care about anybody else, right? Yep. And so I think that it's good to be tough, but if you try to just be tough all the time, you're going to wind up like that broken old farmhand guy that you see that's missing some fingers and some teeth and maybe an eye. Like, that guy is tough as shit, but he's not smart enough to get out of the way when something's coming at his face. So, I mean, it all, all roads lead back to balance for me. That's just, as much as I try to explore each different thing, like pride and ego and art and, you know, being hard and being soft and being this and being that, it all comes back down to, you can't be all one thing. You can't just hit the gas in one direction. You've got to kind of like stand on the lily pad and keep your, you know, shifting your weight back and forth from one side to the other, because if you don't, this side's going to go under. You've got to shift weight back to this side or you're going to sink. And
I have a hunch that you would like lobster fishing. I don't know if you have sea legs, but I think if you like this kind of thinking, you would enjoy it.
If you just lock your knees in and stand there stiff, you're gonna get busted up, hurt, you know. So you've got to be.
I think I think about that with a lot of this like mobility movement world, whether it's in the grappling world or else, is like, it talks about that a lot. And that seems like a good hold or a good metaphor, I guess, for the pride ego thing, is like, you need enough something to keep you upright. If that's a direction that you want to go, it makes working easier sometimes. But then also you need a little bit you need that flexibility to go back and forth. And man, I'm amazed at how quickly it changes. Like my sense of you talked about that earlier, like 1 year ago where you were at and the dynamic that's gotten you to here. That's something that I probably go down too many rabbit holes, spend a little too much art time thinking about like what the future is gonna look like and be, and probably keep it a little bit more right here.
I think one thing that has really helped me is finding my red flags. Recognizing my red flags. Like I see red flags in other people, I've got to see the red flags in myself. Like when I'm getting emotional about something, that's a red flag. Why are you getting emotional about this thing? You should be rational all the time. Like, but at the same time, you know, you got to be emotional with loving people and, you know, feeling sympathy and empathy and like all these things. You have to have emotion, but you don't need to have emotion in certain aspects of your life, like zero emotion in business, you know, zero emotion in, but then again, like, isn't passion and emotion? Like, don't you want to be passionate about what you do to make money? So, where to go from there? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do. And I think it's
red flags, and being able to identify them and see like, okay, Mike, this is a red flag. You're going to go down a rabbit hole if you don't balance this out. Okay, Mike, you're getting super pissed off in your truck right now because some asshole just cut you off. Like, you got to balance this out. What's the opposite of what you're being right now? You need to be that.
Mm-hmm.
Finding those red flags and being able to detach and look at myself and go, you're being a jackass right now. Stop that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the things that dropped out in the transition. And I was trying to ask a little bit about like the move from training with your friends, like being part of the team, and then going to you're working solo. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that like, I think I was telling Chris about this a little while ago, the feeling of I had a hard decision I had to make. And I think I shared with you, I used to coach basketball for one season, and I had a conversation with my old coach self. Sounds a little weird to talk about talking to myself, but I do. And what my coach said to me coach was like, oh, you have this already. You don't need it. You don't need me to tell you anything new. Right. But that's, I think when you're talking about the red flags and trying to get better at identifying your own red flags for your own self, right? Whether it's a red flag about ego or a red flag about pride or whatever, like, oh, and that's like learning like, oh, how to deal with those emotions, right? Because they're just a part of you and they're a part of your life and they're going to arise. But like, yeah, learning to recognize like, oh, I'm being overburdened by an emotion. And that's, if you're not in the fighting ring, right? Or you don't have a good relationship necessarily with your boss, like you're going to be asked to do that yourself, or check in with your partner, or check in with your fellow fighter or coworker, whoever. And I guess that's another place when I think about ego in the workplace, especially in like male dominated workplaces, is like, holy cow. The like, well, you don't like being met with a range of things. Like some people are like, you know, in the fishing world, you don't know how to do that. You don't know how to do this, and being like, no, I never did it before. Like, but finding coworkers, I guess, that are also good at editing that ego out and in service of a process. Like, certainly there's a worker who sees the 13 gates in 3 hours and is like, yeah, but I always did it that way. And they're like attached to their old ego method, or attached to like, everybody who's anybody knows how to do X. You're like, I didn't until now.
Yeah, I do. It's funny because I deal with welders a lot. And I deal with forklift drivers a lot, and I deal with people that are really, really good at what they do, and they're only around other people that do what they do.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying there. Like, you know, when I go in and I like to weld. I got a little portable welder down in my barn, and I like to dabble with it and try to weld. I'm not on their level. So when I go in and I see them do something, I go, why are you doing that? And they're like, oh, that's just how you do it, dumbass. And I'm like, oh, shit, I didn't know that, you know?
Yeah.
I can't punch that guy in the face for calling me a dumbass.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I have to crush down my ego a little bit and go, well, oh, you might be able to weld better than me, but I can choke you right now. I can put you to sleep. I can manipulate all the joints in your body right now, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I digress. You're
Sure.
You're a
I
good
guess
welder.
maybe that's a double step on the ego has no place in learning. It's like, it's certainly not going to help you teach. Like, I've never had a good interaction with a teacher who has a mega ego. Like, never in my life. The teacher who's like, you do this because I tell you to, you better be really, 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 really like super, super the best ever to get me to not want to use my inventive, adaptive brain. Because like, even if you've got the method, I don't know if it works with my body, especially in the, like, when we're talking in the deeply physical worlds, like, you're 5'7", I'm 6'2". Like, I have a different span. I have a different engagement with this weight. Like, there's no, yeah, like I guess that's where ego stops to make sense to me a little bit. Wow. I'm getting so excited. I can't even talk really.
Two things, right? So one, ego has no place in learning because a big ego is a person that is never wrong, right? Someone with a big ego always has to be right. And if you're right, then how are you learning anything? If you were right, then there would be nothing to learn. You're already right. So you absolutely have to be wrong. If you think that mediocre is a vegetable, then you've got room to learn. You see, if you think, that's what I'm saying.
I like that.
If you're, that's what I'm saying. You have to actually be wrong about something to ever learn something. Because if you're always right about everything, then you already know everything. Like, how can you get any better if you're already the best? And I think a lot of people look at themselves. I know my dad will never see this, so I can say this. My dad is one of those people who thinks he's already got it all. He's fine. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm happy with the way that I am. But Dad, you can barely walk. If you would do these things that I'm telling you, then your legs would work better, and your back wouldn't hurt, and you would have a much better quality of life. Nope, I'm fine the way that I am. I'm good. Okay, then don't ever complain to me again about your back hurting or your legs not working right or anything, because I want to help you, and you are constantly refusing my help because you think you're good enough the way you are.
And do you think that's pride or ego on his part?
I think it might be his ego. I think that people always say like, oh, I had to swallow my pride. Like, no, you didn't. You had to swallow your ego. Because being proud, to me, I think that if you had a coin and it had a nice clean side and then it had a dirty screwed up side that's been sitting in the mud all the time, that would be pride and ego. I think that pride is one side of a coin and ego is the other side. I think that if you flip that coin and you land on ego, it comes with emotions. It comes with a lot of like love of the useless. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that it's almost like the character Two-Face in Batman. You know what I'm saying? It's the same guy. It's the same guy. But what reaction are you going to get from that guy? It depends on, are you getting his ego or are you getting his pride?
I was just going to say, I agree with what you're saying, and I see that, but then I try to think in the mindset of the person, right? Because I have a dad that's the very same way. And I would say he's enough destroyed of a man to not have an ego anymore. And all he's hanging on to is his pride. Right. And you know, so what I mean by, you know, and we'll kind of maybe use this question or like round things out, is all of us have kind of understood that there's this continuum with these notions of pride and ego that could be on the opposites, but there's also a blur in the middle. And so I think, like anything, when you're trying to define contrast, I think there's I don't want to say a danger, but there is a wariness at the very least on saying this is good, this is bad, this is dirty, this is clean. Because again, if we go back to Rufus's story, who said, what I really needed was some ego, right? And you know what I mean? In that situation, the ego was the clean side he needed to go after. And that's because he knew, again, on that continuum, he was over here. So he personally sought for the better of himself to go in this direction. Right now, he could have, right, blasted off, and now he's a complete jerk, and then he'd have to make his way back. But again, instead of, if we could, as a people, and this is what critical thinkers do, could we challenge this good, bad, black, white, and can we recognize that there's a gray, that the gray would probably serve everyone better? Right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think that maybe, Rufus needed a little bit of dirty ego in himself, a little bit of machismo, a little bit of alpha male, push in him to make him kind of go after, to awaken that part of him. Because that part of you, if I never lifted my right arm, it would get useless. And so I think that if you when you grow up, like one thing that is happening in our society now is there's this toxic masculinity thing going around, and you got a lot of guys who are scared to touch masculinity in any way because they don't want to be labeled as toxic masculinity. And I think that where you can draw the line between masculine and toxic masculinity is, look at your grandfather, look at your great grandpa, how did your great grandpa act? Was he just a respectful kind of guy? You know what I'm saying? Or was he like this? Was he like a womanizer type guy? Find a positive male role model. If you don't have one, find one from TV. Leave It to Beaver's dad was a good dude. The guy from Green Acres, you know what I'm saying? Like, emulate that.
Yeah, and I think
those guys are not. None of those guys are Russell Crowe from Gladiator. Just I'm gonna kill everything inside. But they're also not some guy that you can just walk in and push over, because they're gonna protect their house, their family, their things. And so I think that there needs to be a certain amount of machismo, masculine, alpha, whatever you want to call it, in a man, so that if needed, he can call upon it. But there also needs to be within a man the capability for great kindness and compassion, because when he needs to call upon that, it needs to serve him well, or as well as that machismo needs to serve him.
Yeah. And I guess when I look at it, I'm looking at this moment as like that one is the one that's like seems to be in shorter supply. I'm watching whatever I'm watching and seeing like over and over again versions of like what looks like very, very toxic, murderous masculinity, and being like that, how to meet that with a strength that says like, if you're you, and saying like, having that version of you that says like, I can choke you out, but so whatever, that says like, I don't know, I'm really curious about that. Like, I agree that I needed some kind of dose of that for my own self, or at least to explore what that felt like in me. When I'm talking to you last time about, there's the world of people that are helpful for me on the kindness, gentleness side, but won't admit that sometimes they really like do want to grab that person by the throat. And being like, how do you process that, right? Like, you can't be scared of that imagination in yourself. You have to go there and feel out what that is. And that's, you talk about your encounter, right? When you asked your coach to do that for you, right? And be like, take me through this. I want to experience that. And that's where it's like, I think maybe there's a little bit of difference where like, I think there is some importance for men to do that. And then I also think like, I just come back to the everybody stand. Like, everybody gets to experience their body and like whatever it is. And that's in part because I share life with Liz, who like I feel like in the roles between us, it's much more often me being like, maybe don't, like, I know you want to punch that guy out for what he said, but like that's a workplace assault. Like we don't want to go there. Like I don't want to get the call that you're in the station, you know, or in the brig in Antarctica. Like I don't want
Well, I think part of finding that balance is knowing when to punch someone in the face and when not to punch someone in the face. You know, and that really has come with maturity, you know, over the years. I think I think that it's good to teach. I think I matured a lot faster once I started doing martial arts than I would have if I hadn't done martial arts. I think that kids that do martial arts kind of get that idea a lot younger, that with, you know, that stupid saying, with power comes great responsibility. With the ability to like hurt people with your hands, you're taught that you don't hurt people with your hands. You defend people. You don't go out and start fights. You don't pick fights with people. But if you see some kid getting picked on, it's absolutely up to you to go over there and help that kid. And I think that is something that you can't have one without the other. You can't have kids who are capable of going and helping out the weaker kid if they're not capable of great violence as well. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I do.
As much as I want to say, like, oh, if every kid was a social worker and had the mental maturity to go and talk down a bully, that would be even better. But we can't rely on children to have that type of mental capacity. We can teach them jujitsu, though. We can teach them taekwondo. And no matter what anybody says, getting punched in the mouth is one of the best bully deterrents that there is. And so I think that, you know, just martial arts is one of those things that I respect so much, because it's one of those things where I find balance. I find complete balance, because I go to the gym and I train with guys that can kill me, and I train with guys that I can completely mutilate. You see what I'm saying? I don't mutilate them because they're my training partners and I want them to be there next time. Just like the black belts don't mutilate me because they want me to come back. We learn this mutual respect through simulating murder on each other.
I guess how about this as a final question? And it is okay. And it's, again, kind of a great talk, not kind of, an absolutely a great talk, but again, it could diverge and keep going and keep going.
Sure. Well, what about the piece that you had in the beginning, the change piece, or maybe you're headed there? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a whole different topic, but I guess going to what Mike's saying, and I'm going to have Rufus answer first, is, do you need to experience the extremes in order to culminate that balance? So we kind of got Mike's perspective on that. But if I'm going to, if I kick it over to Rufus, do I need, for example, this idea that I could love someone real hard or I can punch him in the face? Do I need to experience both of those things in order to find a middle? Or can I rationalize that middle from what my idea of those two things are? What do you think, Rufus?
I don't know. I mean, practically speaking, I've had to ride those extremes. Like, that's been my experience. So I don't know how to talk outside of that experience. I think about the image of like puppies learning bite inhibition, and how if you don't have a puppy that learns to roll with puppies and like when to stop biting, they can become a problem dog. And so like that's, I think when Mike says like maybe Rufus needed a little dose of machismo, absolutely. And I think it's something that I like both shied away from and was protected from, and like wasn't part of my like familial culture so much. So I didn't have as much, I tried to find it, right? And I did in certain ways, but it I think presenting those options to people wherever they like, whatever gender they inhabit, whatever, like giving that option of like, how do you know if you want to fight, right? Or like experience that extreme unless it is an option to you. And if it's an option to you, and like how to make it an option to you, where like, I don't know, I want to spread that around. And I think that's the trickiness though of that crucible, I guess, and like how to make space for everyone to try it, at least if they want to try it. And but I don't know, it's like the same thing of when I think about some of my harder experiences in life and lessons that I've taken away from them, I want it to be possible to not have to learn it that hard way. Like I think Mike and I both have some of that, of like learning hard lessons was a good teacher in some ways. And I don't see a way around the possibility that you might encounter a hard lesson in life in some capacity. At the same time, I don't want for anyone to have to experience like that, being bullied in that way. When I think about the teaching of the bullying, like, yeah, when I talk to fathers who are telling their young daughters, like, if someone hits on you, like, you walk right up to them and you hit them as hard as you can. Like, there's a part of me that is like, yeah, I think that's good teaching. I do. And it's it's not fully vetted in my head, right? Like there's other components to it, but I do want the world where we don't have to deal with bullies on the schoolyard in that way. That was such a problem. Like, that's why I stepped away from organized sports, was people that had way too massive egos. And like, whether it's the coach or the team captain that like didn't have room for growth and learning, and being like, yeah, I don't think we need that extreme, like people come back at me hard on it. Cause obviously I inhabit, or maybe not obviously, whatever. I would say if you made a spectrum of masculinity between me and Mike, like we've got a little bit softer in me, and like, I don't know, you seem like a pretty kitteny guy, honestly, in a great way, but still I would say you're a little bit harder than me, right? Like maybe, and that's cool. But I guess I'm just saying, having to articulate that kind of thing. Like I have conversations with male friends about hazing sometimes. It's like popular in sports culture. I don't know what it's like in fighting culture, right? I mean, the whole fight is the hazing in some way. It's like, you're the new guy, you're going to get pounded on. Okay, like you signed up for it. But when I think about other kinds of it, I just have like I was talking to a guy who was in the Army, right? And one of their things was, when you got pinned, like you put the pins on and you don't have the backs on, and like everyone in turn is like, and just being like, I get it. I guess like this is some kind of initiation for some kind of people. I don't need that. I don't think that really does serve something. When I think about those kinds of examples, but I don't know, maybe it does.
Okay, I thought I liked that. I thought it was well thought out. Again, this idea of maybe, absolutely. Because again, different strokes, different folks. Mike, what's your thoughts?
It's funny because this kind of ties into one of those topics that I sent to you earlier about visualization and imagery. Is, I feel like that we should experience hard times so that when hard times come along, the rug's not completely pulled out from under us. That's one of the great things about, kids doing jujitsu, is that they lose at tournaments, and you're not, they're not proud of themselves when they lose. It hurts, but they learn that you can lose and it's okay. Life still goes on. It's not the end of the world. So while experiencing is very, very valuable, I don't think that it's entirely necessary, because I've recently been reading this book where they talk about using visualization and imagery and using, like, going through the motions of things and hearing the sounds of things all together to create skills that you don't even have. And so if I can create skills that I don't have just by using imagery and visualization and motor muscle skills, and I believe that, I could probably, learn things without actually doing them. Like, I can read a book and I can learn from that book. I don't have to go to 1564 to King Henry's court and experience that to learn about it. So there is learning without experience, but I think it's kind of like a dartboard. You know what I'm saying? In the center, you've got experience, which is the most valuable teacher. And then outside of that, you've got whatever kind of learning, experience, the next best kind of learning. And then you've got reading it in a book, and then you've got visualization. I think there's like an onion, like there should be layers to how you learn. If you can only learn by getting hit in the face, you're going to have a rough time in life. If you only learn by reading books, you're going to have a rough time when you go outside. And so, again, finding some balance. Between the two. I think that it's all necessary. Without darkness, there can't be light. Without light, you can't have darkness. You need darkness to sleep and grow. Plants need it to grow, but we also need the sun to grow. We need to challenge our muscles, but we also need to rest and recover for them to grow stronger. And so I think that everything has got to somehow come back to a balance.
Yeah. And I don't know, stitching back to the very beginning on this, that's where I think work is, like, martial arts is one teacher, and then the work component is another great teacher, in terms of, like, two people with the biggest egos in the world can come together. And if it's, like, I don't know, the same army friend that I'm talking about, right? He's also if we sit down to shell a pile of crab claws together, I will have gotten through a third of a 5-gallon bucket by the time that he gets done with 2. Like, that's just the difference in our capacity there. And it's like, that to me is a great, like, he doesn't dance around and be like, you suck at this. It's just like, I don't know, I've been doing this a really long time. And that, I guess that's what I'm saying, like, trying to say too, is between the extremes, like, having the experience of egoless work, it's I don't know, it's like when you're watching two fighters that are so evenly matched that you just kind of want to watch the fight go on and on and on, and you can imagine, like, this is just, everyone's at the edge of their game. And that, like, I think that's the kind of, like, extremes, is like not some abstract extreme over here, but like watching two people create some kind of thing. It's neat to watch. Like, I don't know another way to describe it. And that's, like, true whether it's musicians, like watching two guys on a banjo go back and forth with each other. You're like, that's
kind of like the dynamic between Muhammad Ali and what was it, Joe Frazier or Joe Louis. The one, they brought the best out in each other, and they would talk smack back and forth to each other at weigh-ins and in interviews and stuff. But when they got in the ring together, they absolutely brought their best out of each other. And so one reason people, enjoyed their fights so much was because they just, if I go and grapple against a guy that sucks, I'm not going to have to do very good to beat him. Nobody's going to enjoy watching that match. But if I go up against, like you were saying, something that's very evenly matched with me, and we just go and go and go, like, there's no end to it. Like, we're so evenly matched that that's an interesting thing. And so nobody wants to see David versus Goliath, where Goliath wins. That's right. We all know that was going to happen. But when David wins, it's inspiring, and we're all proud of David because he beat the Goliath, And so I don't know. I'm with you. And the thing you were saying about, like, the other end of the spectrum, like, you just made it a 3D spectrum, because we were talking about good versus bad. And then you're talking about two goods coming together for collaboration and making some, like in business, if two super egos hit each other, nobody's going to make a deal. The deal's not going to get done. And so for two super egos to be over here, but two like totally proud hard workers over here, you know, I mean, that's like, yeah, I didn't even look at that space. We were talking about up and down, and you're talking about like diagonal, you know? So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I think that's coming out of an emergent property, like from this kind of conversation, right? Like we're building some kind of knowledge of each other, and that, yeah, I come right back when we're talking about ego. It goes back to the, like, you know, you express that regret of like, I didn't want to play with these people because they weren't at my level, and I lost out. And that honest admission of like there's the wanting to like go back and forth and like be able to be met at your extreme, right? And like that's really exciting when you, especially as you keep leveling up, like I want to be able to push and push and push, but then seeing like, oh, if I'm not with anyone like that, I might have to teach this person. They might not be very fun for a while, but then they might level up and really hand it to me. And like, that's the other kind of ego, that like handing it over piece. That's, I don't know. That takes that kind of humility to like still have like, I don't know. That's a really neat thing to witness when people have that balance of pride and ego, to be able to like, yeah, you got me, like you win the prize, like whatever it is, and still feel like, you know, I'm not lesser. I competed my best. I did my best. That's that's
it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's some growth. These are great. I'm really enjoying this kind of conversation.
That was an excellent loop back around. And again, of course, we could keep going, but we'll just keep having parts. I like how this went. So enjoy the rest of your day, guys. I'll get this up, and I have a feeling I'm going to. I might put these on the podcast sooner. So I just started a podcast with these audios, and this is later. This is the newest, but I think it's also more relevant to the world, perhaps. So I think we'll front these up a little bit quicker, just so that it's out there. So we'll talk again, more topics. Enjoy it, guys. Thanks again.
Sounds good. Nice to talk to you again, Mike.
Nice to talk to you. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.